with sin, and Brother Don illustrated it in one of his episodes of It's My Turn called The Danger of Playing Around. Read about it and listen to that episode when you visit afa.net/The Stand.
Welcome to today's issues. Join us for the next hour as we offer a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome to today's issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. And I am joined in studio by Chris Woodward. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
And then in Kansas City, KC, Dr. Ray Pritchard. Good morning to you, Ray.
Good morning. How are you, Ed?
I'm doing well. It's just us three. We three. We do have Brent Creeley, our producer, in here, but he doesn't really count. I mean, Brent and I, folks, for those of you going, ooh, that's a terrible thing to say, we kid each other all day long, all day, every day. He's like the brother I never had and never wanted. See, folks, we're just kidding around. Listen, he gets even with me. He slashes my tires. He puts things in my Diet Coke, messes up my cough drops that I put here in an orderly fashion. So, well, that's 2 minutes, folks. You'll never get back again as I discuss my relationship with our producer here. It is Wednesday, May 29th. Fred Jackson is doing another show. I think he's doing Walker's show. He's doing Walker's show later on the day, so we gave him the day off. Steve Jordahl will be on with us at the top of the next hour, as is typical. At the bottom of the hour, we will have Dr. Matt Ayers, who's lead pastor at New Beginnings Methodist Church in Madison, Mississippi. We're going to have Dr. Ayers on because, in light of the killings last week of David and Natalie Lloyd, and also Jude Montes in Haiti, David and Natalie Lloyd are missionaries from the States, a young couple. We talked about that yesterday. But Dr. Ayers and his family spent many years as missionaries in Haiti. Went on to found a college and a seminary and serve as president there for a while. So we want to talk to Dr. Ayers about Haiti, about the spiritual situation there, about some of the dangers that missionaries there face, just to kind of, just talk 10 or 15 minutes, talk to Dr. Ayers to give our listeners a better understanding on the part of someone who has been there. Ray Pritchard, Ray, you have taught in Haiti. So you gave us some insights yesterday into that spiritual situation.
I'm looking forward to talking to Dr. Ayers and get his viewpoint on, some people have said, some people who do not look at the world the way as Christians we do, well, they shouldn't have been there at all. It was too dangerous. They shouldn't have been there, and that all Christian workers ought to leave Haiti immediately. It's a dangerous place, and it's more dangerous now than in India. I've been there 5 times, but not in the last few years, and it has descended into total chaos.
Yeah.
And this young couple, this Natalie and Davy Lloyd, we can say this much: they knew the dangers,
Right?
and they stayed anyway out of their love for Christ. So I'm looking forward to talking to Dr. Ayers about that and getting his viewpoint.
Ray, and then Chris, we will get here to the news. But something you said, Ray, just maybe want to just push this just a little bit further. But of course, anyone who's familiar with the Gospels and what Jesus warned his disciples about regarding the dangers that they would face understands this. But you were talking about how the world and people who are not Christian, who are outside the church and the Christian community, don't understand. But even from a historical perspective, Christianity, we have Christianity in this country because people went where there was spiritual darkness. And Europe was basically Christianized to a large degree because Christian missionaries would go into places that were under the religious views of the Northmen or whatever, the Anglo-Saxons. So this is the way Christianity spread, was Christians understanding the dangers, but for the love they had for Jesus Christ and the people that God also loved, the pagan peoples that Christ also loved, they went into those dangerous situations. And unless you're a Christian, it is hard to imagine why someone would do that.
You know, if you don't know Jesus, it looks like madness. Why in the world, and not just the situation in Haiti, but why in the world would a young couple trained in the U.S., college graduates, smart, why would I know a case of two medical doctors, both of them, husband and wife, medical doctors. I was their pastor for many years. They super well trained in two of the best medical schools in America. They set aside a very high-paying career at the top of the top to go to Nigeria and serve. And their parents had a great difficulty understanding why in the world aren't there sick people here in America? Yes. Couldn't you stay and help people here in America? Yes. And the only final answer is God has called, and we must respond. And the only other thing I want to say, Ed, to your point, Christianity has been from day one a missionary religion.
Right.
We didn't make that up. We got that from our founder, the Lord Jesus Christ. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. And it's a simple fact of the 12 of the original apostles. They all died as martyrs, spreading the gospel throughout the Roman Empire. And the only possible exception is the Apostle John, who ended up in, on the island of Patmos in prison. The founders, Jesus, the head of the church, and the apostles upon whom the church is built, they showed us the way. And for 2,000 years, Christians, for better or worse, have been taking the gospel into some very difficult places. But that's why there's the gospel in Asia, in China, in Africa, in Europe, and here in North America.
Yeah. I want to point people to our Today's Issues Facebook page because I just posted a nice article from our Steve Jordahl. He's doing some continuing coverage of this situation in Haiti that we are discussing today and we've been talking about since last week. Steve interviewed Todd Nettleton of Voice of the Martyrs. There's a really nice quote in here from Todd Nettleton and Steve's story, and it says, "Those who go to hard places, those who stay, even as law and order is breaking down to represent Jesus Christ, are heroes." Speaking of those who stay, yesterday, and I've shared this link as well on our Facebook page, yesterday, Jenna Ellis interviewed Missouri State Representative Ben Baker. He is the father of the young lady killed last week and the father-in-law of the young man. And Representative Baker told Jenna yesterday that he became aware of Davy many years ago when Ben Baker was in Bible school, and he had heard that Davy and his sister had been kidnapped as 5-year-old children in Haiti, and they were thankfully returned. No harm was done for them, but the family chose to stay there. Even after their children were kidnapped and they served there, they're still serving there. And as far as it appears, they're not leaving.
Well, and last thing I will say on this is that, and then we'll move on, but that some might consider the death of this young couple a tragedy. And I am not making light of or being dismissive of the pain and the anguish that the parents certainly must be feeling, even though they're Christians. All right, I can't imagine outliving my children. That's J.J. Jasper and Melanie, his wife. They've had to experience that. So believe me, folks, that is a whole separate category of pain and grief. However, for Christians, dying young in the service of Christ is not a tragedy, okay, in the eternal scope of things. It is a tragedy for those who lose their loved ones, but the Bible makes clear that martyrs are a part of the way by which God paves the road for the progress of the gospel. It's in the book of Revelation, where there are martyrs beneath the throne of God. I think of the 1956 martyrdom. I looked it up so I could get all the. I could remember Jim Elliot, but Jim Elliot, Nate Saint, Ed McCully, Peter Fleming, Roger Udarian, who were speared to death by the tribesmen of a group in Ecuador, I think. Ray, I think that's where they were. That was broadcast around the world. Life magazine had a photo essay. A lot of people sharing the same kind of sentiments as Ray and you, Chris, are talking about, where people just say, "Wow, that's why do you even do that?" But people came to Christ from that tribe, and who knows what God might do even in Haiti over this. And it is tragic, but in God's economy, this is a way in which God frequently brings great goodness, great good and deliverance, healing, and even salvation for people who sometimes are the ones who committed the murderous acts. So, Ray, anything you want to add to that, and then we can move on.
I'm just reminded of the famous words of Tertullian, one of the fathers of the early church. This statement is, I suppose, 1,800 years old. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. It has been so in every generation. So we've been reminded in these recent days of the high cost of the Great Commission. But out of this tragedy, and humanly speaking, you cannot say anything else but that it is a tragedy. We don't understand the big picture yet, but out of this tragedy, from the seeds that were sown there in Haiti, there will yet come a beautiful harvest in the plan of God, and God will be glorified in what has happened. And so it's not just true today, Ed and Chris. It has been true for 2,000 years.
And folks, let we who remain behind, and I can't help but say these kind of things, folks. I know this is not usually a preaching program, but I do want to encourage those of you who are listening who are Christians, all of us. I remind myself of this, to be bold in the presentation of the gospel. We are not facing, so far in this country, spears like Jim Elliot and his brothers on that beach in Ecuador. We are not facing gangs, murderous gangs, as this young couple, the Lloyds, faced in Haiti. So we can be bold. We don't have to be jerks about it, but we can be bold in the presentation of the gospel, and be inspired by those who actually do lay down their lives for Christ. So let that be an encouragement to all of us to continue praying for their families, praying for Haiti, and praying for our country and the loved ones we have who do not yet know the Lord. All right. I didn't intend that, but God can use that to encourage people who are listening.
Amen.
Chris, let's go on with the news of the day.
In other news, jurors in Donald Trump's hush money trial are expected to begin deliberations today after receiving instructions from the judge and the factors they may consider as they strive to reach a verdict. This is not only a big story here in the U.S., where at least 3 of the big television networks are all over it. Even the BBC spent a large amount of time on it just now, although they've moved over to U.S. border news. So this is getting a lot of coverage on both sides of the pond, so to speak. The deliberations follow a marathon day of closing arguments in which a Manhattan prosecutor accused former President Trump of trying to, quote, hoodwink voters in the 2016 presidential election by participating in a so-called hush money scheme meant to stifle embarrassing stories Trump feared would torpedo his campaign. Trump's attorneys, meanwhile, bashed the star witness Michael Cohen yesterday as the, quote, greatest liar of all time. Trump, meanwhile, faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, charges punishable by up to 4 years in prison. Speaking of those charges, I've got a soundbite here of former Representative and Prosecutor Trey Gowdy of South Carolina. He thinks Trump could actually be convicted of a misdemeanor if the judge allows it. Clip 1.
Yeah, it depends on whether or not, it depends on two things, whether or not the judge is really willing to charge it and whether or not the defense is willing to accept it. Keep in mind, this really is a misdemeanor that just put on a tuxedo to look like a felony. So if the judge gives the jury the option of the misdemeanor and the jury compromises, and look, juries love to compromise. Instead of being a hung jury, they may say, let's compromise on the misdemeanor. There's zero chance that he will go to jail for the misdemeanor. If he's convicted of 34 felony counts, given the fact that this judge clearly does not like him, and given the fact that the judge may want to send a message that no one is above the law, there is a possibility of an active sentence, custodial sentence for the former president.
I do want to point out that former President Trump has pleaded not guilty and has repeatedly denied wrongdoing in this case.
Well, Ray, I don't think any of us know how this thing is going to go. And frankly, I don't understand a lot of the legalities of what is about to transpire. I'm looking at an article on Fox News. Jonathan Turley, who is the constitutional law attorney from George Washington Law, I think. And he's a contributor on legal matters, not only on Fox, but frequently writes articles. He's saying that the instructions that the judge has given make it possible for the jury to split, and that the judge would then still treat their split rulings as unanimous. I have no idea. Okay, but I am set and do believe that a guilty verdict is what was planned long ago, both in the New York City trial and the other trials that the president is facing, that a guilty verdict is what was intended. I have a hard time believing that this judge, because of all we have covered, is unbiased. I believe this judge has it out for the former president. However, we will have to wait like everybody else, but all this has been going on, I think, is intended to get the felony indictment and conviction that the left has just longed for.
Well, there's a word for this, lawfare, which means using the law for some sort of political end. Now, I am even more unqualified to comment on this on the legal side of it, Ed, than you said you are. I only know what I read and as I followed along. But what's clear about this is the whole thing was set up from the beginning in order to lead the jury to convict President Trump. Understand, this is the first time in American history we've had a president, not a city, but a former president. It's never happened to go to a criminal trial. That's never happened. If he's convicted, that's never happened. One could hope, one could imagine, could he be acquitted? Yeah, that's possible. Doesn't seem likely with a Manhattan jury pool, right? Doesn't seem likely. Could there be a what do you call it? Well, when one or two simply refuse to go along, and I guess you'd call that what is it? What is it when they can't make a decision?
Oh, it's a hung jury.
Thank you. That's what a hung jury. That's what I was looking for. Could be a hung jury, and then the state would have to decide if they're going to do this all over again, and certainly that would happen after November. But can you imagine what will happen in America if tonight or tomorrow or the next day, for the first time in American history, not just a former president, but the leading candidate to be elected this November is convicted? There's going to be 80 million people, just thinking of the people we know who voted for Mr. Trump in 2020, 80 million people unbelievably angry. If you want to see a breakdown in trust as bad as it's been, this will almost be the final severing for those 80 million people. Won't believe anything the government says or does.
Well, Jonathan Turley, this is what he said. I want to quote him because I didn't know this was possible. But again, none of us here are lawyers. We'll have to wait and see, and then the lawyers can explain it to us after it happens. But he says that the judge in this trial, quote, said that there is no need, these are the instructions that he gave to the jury, that there is no need to agree on what occurred. The jury can disagree on what the crime was among the three choices. Thus, this means they could split 4-4-4. In other words, 4 jurors believe he did crime number 1, 4 believe crime number 2, 4 believe crime number 3, and the judge will still treat them as unanimous. I have never heard of that kind of thing. Maybe that's an odd quirk in the New York law, but you're supposed to have a unanimous verdict. So you would think you'd have to have 12 jurors, but Jonathan Turley is saying the judge is giving instructions so that you could have 4 unanimous about one crime, 4 on another, and then it's a unanimous verdict. This seems so bizarre to me, but I guess we'll have to wait to see what happens. That sounds to me yet another reason to believe that this judge and the way this prosecution was set up was to tilt the field so that President Trump absolutely cannot win. And I guess we'll wait to see. Chris, is there any discussion on how long they expect the jurors to deliberate?
I don't have a ballpark figure, but
I mean, I guess it depends.
Yeah,
it can go for an undetermined length of time, but
I still find it hard to believe, and I've said as much on the show, I still find it hard to believe they found 12 people on planet Earth that are supposedly impartial and have no opinion one way or the other about Donald Trump.
Nobody. I don't think anybody believes that. I really, there's no way in Manhattan that the former president could get a fair trial.
No.
That's my opinion, folks. Listen.
Yeah.
I just think that is on its taking things at face value, the truth.
You could have it in Manhattan, Kansas, and still have a problem of Donald Trump not getting a fair trial.
Right.
Ray, you know about Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah. Well, there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Mr.
There
Trump
is.
would
I mean, those
he'd
Manhattan-
get
Brooklyn,
a completely
Mississippi.
different verdict in Manhattan, Kansas than in Manhattan, New York City.
All right. Well, you got anything else connected to this trial?
I don't, but I will say in quick election news, current President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, they're going to make a campaign stop today in Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, in hopes of enticing black voters to stick with them. This campaign, for those not aware, have been losing support in the African-American community or black community due to things like the economy. Black unemployment was much lower under former President Trump when he was in office than it ever has been under Joe Biden and his Vice President Kamala Harris. So they're going to Philadelphia today to try to do that. Do I have time for one clip? Okay, let's do this. It's Philadelphia resident Jamil Jackson, a registered Democrat. He likes what Trump has to say, Biden not so much. Clip 4.
It was definitely Trump's message. I think when it comes to Biden's message, it was definitely more of, I remember, I think in Black History Month, he was sitting down with a black father and his 2 black children, and they were eating fried chicken for Black History Month. And this was one of his ways of reaching out to the black community. And I think there's so many signs of just tokenism. And I also think when I see Trump speak, there's so many instances of where, yes, he might go after Biden for Biden unjustly going after him politically with the government and the legal system. However, he doesn't go after all Democrats and everyone who supports Biden. I think he really is trying to unify the country. Whereas with Biden and other Democrats, they're going after anyone who is Republican, who is MAGA, who wants to see, I guess, more resources used for actual American citizens, including Black Americans.
Ray, let me just ask you this. What do you make? And we're not political scientists either, Ray. You are. We're not lawyers. We're not political citizens, political scientists. 30 seconds. Do you think that this has legs, that Trump, quote unquote, has legs in the Black and Hispanic communities, with some of the support for the Democrats seeming to peel away and move towards Trump? Or do you think this is just pre-summer irritation at the current administration?
I think it has legs, Ed, and I predict that in November, Mr. Trump is going to get a bigger share of the black vote than he did in 2016 or 2020. It's still going to go overwhelmingly Democrat, but there is movement. Ed, something is happening out there for sure.
And it doesn't. I don't know what the percentages have to be in order to make a difference in some of these states where big cities like Cleveland and Ohio
Right.
Detroit in Michigan, those kinds of places where it can tip a battleground state to Trump.
Just a few points in
Yep.
Michigan or Pennsylvania could make
Right,
the
Pennsylvania, another one. Yep. All right, folks, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, Dr. Matt Ayers will be on to discuss the situation in Haiti and what he thinks the spiritual climate is there. And we'll talk a little bit more about maybe what Christians have to endure when they go overseas. We'll take a short break and be right back. Hope you join us.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him unto the high priest's house. Peter followed at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. After Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was carried to the house of Joseph Caiaphas. Caiaphas was the high priest that year, although it was his father-in-law Annas who had the real power. In all probability, the party walked up a flight of steps in the southern part of Jerusalem to reach the house of Caiaphas. Some steps have been excavated which led to the spot where many believe the house of Caiaphas stood. It is possible to walk those very steps today. The Church of St. Peter in Gallicanto, which means cockcrow, is a lovely little church building constructed by the Augustinian fathers on the site where they accept as that of the house of Caiaphas. The church gets its name from the fact that Peter denied he knew Jesus 3 times in the courtyard before the 3 a.m. hour, the time of the cockcrow. In the life of Jesus, we have some hours between 3 o'clock in the morning and about 6 o'clock in the morning, during which we don't know what happened to him. A visitor to the Church of St. Peter in Gallicanto today will be taken down into the basement to examine a pit carved from the rock. The pit is very small and had only one opening large enough for a person to enter it. The opening is at the top of the pit. The pit was part of the jail located there. Perhaps Jesus, being tried and condemned by an illegal makeshift Sanhedrin, meeting in the early hours, was brought to this pit to spend the next few hours. In the 88th Psalm, one can read what could have been the feelings of Jesus if indeed he was lowered into this pit. Peter denied his Lord that night. He did so, I feel, not so much from cowardice as from bewilderment and confusion. He did not know what Jesus expected him to do. Did he not get rebuked by the Lord in the Garden of Gethsemane just a short time before, when he fought for the safety and release of Jesus? Certainly Peter was confused as to what course of action to follow. Standing on the balcony of the Church of St. Peter in Gallicanto, you can see where the courtyard was that Peter denied his Lord. And as you gaze in that direction, you aren't quite as fast to point the accusing finger at the big fisherman. You can recall those times when you too denied the Lord by silence or inaction. It is one thing to find fault and blame. It is another thing altogether to take a very deep look into one's own commitment. We aren't nearly as perfect as we sometimes think we are. As you leave this beautiful little church building, you do so thinking that you need to spend more time on the log in your own eye and less on the splinter in your neighbor's eye. Jesus was speaking to each of us when he gave that advice.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. Colossians 1, verse 13.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
And welcome back to today's issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. I'm joined in studio by Chris Woodward. Dr. Ray Pritchard is with us from Kansas City, Kansas. And we want to welcome another doctor to the program, Dr. Matt Ayers, who's lead pastor at New Beginnings Methodist Church in Madison, Mississippi. Dr. Ayers and his family spent many years as missionaries in Haiti and went on to found a college and seminary and serve there as president. Matt, welcome to today's issues.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Matt, we talked earlier in the program. Of course, we talked yesterday about the tragic situation in Haiti where Davy and Natalie Lloyd, as well as Jude Montes, I think he was a local director of a missions group, were murdered by gangs in Haiti. So in the Christian community, at least, that has been a topic of conversation. And we wanted to have you on today to talk about your experiences in Haiti because it is that's kind of a mysterious place for a lot of Christians here in the U.S., located on an island split in half, Hispaniola with the Dominican Republic, which is a functioning country with law and order for the most part, it seems like, and a functioning economy. And yet right across that imaginary line in Haiti is the land of, voodoo dolls and occult activity. That's the way, at least that's the way I have looked at it. Tell us what you remember from being there, maybe what your contacts tell you, current people who currently live in that country. What is the actual spiritual climate of that country?
Yeah, the spiritual climate of Haiti is in some ways different yet similar from even what we experience here in the United States. It's just that the manifestation of evil is a lot less subtle there than it would be in a place like Haiti. In the sense, if you were to, visit a witch doctor's, there's not really an English word for it, court, you would say. It's like his yard area with several hut structures. But if you were to visit a witch doctor in his place of practice, let's say, it wouldn't be uncommon to see voodoo dolls and human skulls and human blood and remnants of animal sacrifices. And that's a much more visceral engagement of, spiritual warfare that's clearly in your space, where death is very present, and there's a sense of eeriness, especially with the dolls that have been disfigured kind of stuff, versus, I think what is more subtle in our American context, where a lot of the evil that lurks beneath the surface is just not quite as detectable, because part of it's just because it's our culture and we're used to it. But, greed, materialism, consumerism, the idolatry of sports, all that kind of stuff, it's less visceral. It's less visceral. But I think it's really important. Something I really like to point out about Haiti is that Haiti has wonderful, wonderful Christian people. Now, it's a bit redundant. True Christian people are wonderful people. They're filled with the presence of God, the Holy Spirit, redeemed by Jesus. They love God. They love neighbor. But, Haiti gets such a bad rap, a reputation from, the voodoo, and because of the visibleness of the nature of evil in Haiti. But the church there, there's quite a strong church there, and there are some wonderful disciples of Jesus, people who are following the Lord and whose lives, are very, very difficult because of the lack of law and order, and yet they try to be good citizens of their nation. They try to take care of one another. They're generous to one another. They're compassionate towards one another. So there's a very beautiful aspect to the Haitian culture and the Haitian people that doesn't get much attention. So you have both. You've got deep evil, deep Christian as well.
Matt, tell us a little bit about when were you in Haiti? Tell us a little bit about your experiences, you and your family there when you were there in that country.
We were in Haiti from 2007 to 2020. And we arrived there very young, fresh out of undergraduate school, assigned to work at this Bible college. I was, teaching scripture to undergraduate students, and my wife was teaching English and the marketing director there, and, grew into a leadership position. But we lived on campus, with the students. And so it was always a situation where we were living very, very much in community with our Haitian brethren. We weren't living in this isolated compound with just, missionaries who kind of a lot of mission compounds function like an embassy, where you have all your expats living there together, speaking English and all that. But we lived right with our students and our staff, shared most of our meals with students and staff. My kids would be out playing soccer with the Haitian students and climbing mango trees and picking avocados and all that kind of stuff. And for the most part, our life, I try to explain to people the difference between a standard of living and a quality of life. So the standard of living in the U.S. is very, very high. Indoor plumbing, electricity, cellular access, internet accessibility. We have postal service, police officers, lights to organize traffic. We have millions of choices at the grocery store, pharmacies, places to eat out, lots and lots of options. So the standard of living is very high. We're very comfortable people with all our creature comforts met. But oftentimes our quality of life is abysmal, even though the standard of living is high. We're lonely, we're frustrated, we're angry. People are addicted to all sorts of substances, and where in Haiti it's the inverse, where the standard of living is quite low. Very hard to find indoor plumbing. Not many people have electricity. Cellular access is getting better, but there's armed guards at the gas station. If the gas station has gas today, you've got to have a guard at your compound. So the standard of living is low, but the quality of life is very high in Haiti in a lot of ways. Obviously not every way, but for us, it was hard. We had to run generators for electricity and pump our own water, and we had to, pasteurize our own milk, and had to, go a long way to get good grocery products. Like the state was very hard, a lot of work just to live. But the quality of life was so good because we were surrounded by people who we loved. It was people-oriented. It was sitting down under the mango tree, sharing coconuts and grilled beef and long conversations and laughter and tears. And so that the relationship that's built around a people-oriented culture versus a task or project-oriented culture, which is common in warm culture climates versus cold culture climates, it means for a rich life and deep relationships. Suicide is like unheard of in Haiti. Like, well, why? If the standard of living is so low, why people aren't killing themselves? Because their creature comforts aren't their top priority. Their top priority is their relationships with one another. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Ray, go ahead.
Matt, Ray Pritchard here. Let's get down to the case of what happened just a few days ago. We have this young couple, Davy and Natalie Lloyd, who I think from what I've read would agree with your assessment of life in Haiti, both the difficult side and the open hearts of the people. And the story as it has come out, the details are not just tragic and in some ways horrific, not even some things we wouldn't even repeat here on the radio because they're so difficult. Would you say a word? They were in Port-au-Prince, one of the most dangerous places in the world at this moment. How could this have happened? And what I mean is, there appears to be no government to speak of in Haiti at the present time. So would you comment on what happened and how things could have devolved so terribly in the capital city that a tragedy like what happened to Davy and Natalie Lloyd, how did that happen?
Yeah, that's a difficult it's a difficult question to answer because I think the situation is so complex. And anywhere you go, I mean, why things are the way that they are, it's really, really risky to be oversimplistic and to be reductionistic and reduce things down to X and Y. I would say that, the primary reason why there's lawlessness and I wouldn't call it anarchy, but just a lack of government, a lack of law in the land in Haiti, it boils down to culture. It just boils down to culture. And I think that culture is determined and defined by all sorts of different factors and variables, but one of the main things that determines that is our belief system, our worldviews, the things that we understand to be true. And, in a place like Haiti, it's African culture, even though it's in the Caribbean, because it's made up, 99% of the population have a heritage of African, roots. And what comes with that is animism, which is the worldview of animism, which means that every object is animated or attached to or associated with, that's a better word, associated with some sort of unseen spirit, whether that's an animate object or an inanimate object. So there's a spirit of the bush. There's a spirit associated with the tree, or so inanimate objects. But there's also spirits associated with animate objects. Like there's a spirit of the goat, and there's a spirit of the cow. There's a spirit of course, people then, and there's spirits of even governments, and there's spirits of communities. And so animism, this idea, this very primitive idea that there are spirits and behind every living thing, well, that's a very scary world to live in. Even if the spirits, according to the animistic worldview, are benevolent, out for your good. They want you to be healed, they want to help you, but they're also malevolent spirits that want to hurt you, that are seeking your harm. And so it creates very much this culture of fear. And we know that operating out of place of constant fear of the unknown, fear of why things happen the way that they do, a lack of control over our environment and external circumstances, that just is a perfect soup to create a very dysfunctional context. And so when people are operating out of fear all the time, what happens is it compounds the issue of like this, being, I for one, of course, Christian, I have a Christian worldview, and I understand from the doctrine of original sin that we're all narcissists. We're all bent inward upon ourselves. And there's no part of us that hasn't been by this issue of sin and selfishness. And so you compound that with ongoing fear and a complete inability to understand or control the external world. Well, that's going to make you turn on yourself yet even more. And so you multiply that out over a nation of 10 million people. That's a scary thing. You get someone into a position of power in government, and they're going to want to hoard up and store wealth and not relinquish power, and therefore, do whatever it takes to maintain power and to accumulate wealth, and that means corruption, and that means, dishonesty. And so it's just these I think it's that principle. I think it has everything to do with culture and being dominated by a spirit of fear.
Our guest has been Dr. Matt Ayers, who's lead pastor at New Beginnings Methodist Church in Madison, Mississippi. He and his family spent many years as missionaries in Haiti and went on to found a college and seminary and serve as president there. Matt, thank you so much for these insights, and they were very insightful. Your views about, I especially appreciated the distinction between more explicit evil and the implicit evil that you have in many developed Western countries, including our own. That's something for Christians to keep in mind. But anyway, thank you so much. We appreciate you here at American Family Association, American Family Radio. You've written some good things as well, and we appreciate your insights here on this tragedy in Haiti, and also the statement about the strong church in that country is an encouragement for us, and kind of eye-opening too, to hear that the church is a very bright light in that country. So thank you so much, Dr. Ayers, for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Hey, Ray, I did find that very interesting conversation with Dr. Matt Ayers, and he is right. I was clear about how I saw Haiti just really from media. I've never been to the country. You've been there 5 times. But when talking about the emphasis on death and the demonic, when he was describing some of those things, skulls and that kind of thing, I thought, you know what? You can go to just about any concert in America in the rock and context of rock and roll, and I'm not even talking about going back to Madonna, even some of the current artists and see that same kind of demonic emphasis, and that is a little bit more behind the scenes than when you'd have in Haiti, but it's just as evil.
You know, it was said to me when, on more than one occasion, when we visited Haiti, the country is, it has a very large Roman Catholic population. It has a smaller but growing evangelical, conservative, Protestant church population. And it was said to me something like this, you know, Haiti is what, 80% Roman Catholic and 20% Protestant and 100% voodoo. That is to say, it's so deep.
Yeah.
It's so, as Matt said, it is so deep in the mindset of the people. And even in the good evangelical churches that I would minister with and to there in Haiti, they had church members who still had the amulets and still had the signs and markers of voodoo. They had brought that with them into the Christian church, and sometimes it takes quite a few years for them to let go of all that. And I did read the other day that since Haiti has descended into the kind of chaos that it's a gang. Port-au-Prince is run by gangs, criminal, godless gangs are running Port-au-Prince, that in the midst of all this chaos, voodoo is on the rise again in Haiti. Why? Because I think, as Matt Ayers said, it's a fear-based culture.
Right.
So when chaos breaks out around you, you go back to the amulets. You go back to the witch doctors. They're doing bigger business now because people don't know where else to turn. Another reason for us to pray for that country, and for there's a strong evangelical movement in Haiti, and we ought to be praying for them. I've got the last thing I want to say. Just 2 weeks ago in Little Rock, I was in a 40th anniversary banquet for Hosea International Ministries, the folks we work with in Haiti, up in the northern part, and we were at that banquet about 4 or 5 days before the tragedy happened with Davy and Natalie Lloyd, and the leaders of that ministry, who are dear friends of ours, have since gone back to Cap-Haïtien, which is up on the northern coast of Haiti. And Marlene and I every day are praying for Caleb and Debbie for their safety.
Yeah.
We must pray for our brothers and sisters in Haiti, because it's a dangerous place to be right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if your church does not support an American missionary in Haiti, odds are your church or a church near you does support a national pastor there. There's a number of organizations now that have been created and funded to help reach national pastors, to train them up so that way they can reach people in their own country with their own language. So, you know, while you may not have a Davy or Natalie Lloyd, so to speak, serving in Haiti for your church, you probably do support somebody over there that is a local that's from Haiti. So do be in prayer for that person as well.
All right, Chris, next story.
Yes, from time to time on this here program, we bring in exchanges between America's frenemies, Peter Doocy and Karine Jean-Pierre. And that love affair continued yesterday between these two. Peter Doocy asked Karine Jean-Pierre about a Politico article, which was published yesterday, claiming the Biden administration and the Biden campaign is in freak-out mode over his re-election chances. Hardly a day, an hour goes by without hearing a story about how Biden is hurting in the polls. He's losing this person.
And Politico's not a conservative source of information.
It is not. It is not Fox News. It is not Newsmax or OAN by any stretch of the imagination. So for Politico to say the Biden administration is in freak-out mode, somebody close to Joe Biden and the campaign went on the record and told them as much. So Peter Doocy asked Karine Jean-Pierre about that yesterday. And keep in mind, there are rules and regulations that somebody, let's say the press secretary, can't talk about campaign issues, and that would be the same thing for a Republican. But Peter Doocy did ask her about that, and listen to what she has to say here. Clip 7.
Are you guys here at the White House in full-blown freak-out mode?
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
There's a Politico story. It sounds like Democrats outside, the quote is, Biden's stubbornly poor polling and the stakes of the election are creating the freakout.
So, again, I'm going to be mindful. I'm not going to comment on 2024 election. I will say this. The president has never forgotten where he came from, who he is. He understands what the American people are going through as they're sitting around the kitchen table. You hear the president talk about his time growing up, where he watched his family having to sit around the kitchen table, making incredibly difficult decisions. And the president has always said he's going to fight for communities that have been forgotten, and you see that in the policies, economic policies that he's put forward. He's going to continue to fight for the middle class. He's going to continue to fight in every way that he can. You heard me at the beginning talk about junk fees, incredibly important, and he's going to continue to fight and to make sure that corporation greed doesn't continue to take hold. That is something that he's been very clear about, while Republicans are doing the opposite. They put out a policy where they want to give a big tax break to the wealthiest among us, billionaires and corporations. That's not what the president wants to do.
3 things there. Number 1, she's not going to comment on campaign issues, but she went into full campaign mode. 2, she continues to throw out this thing that they're doing things to get rid of junk fees. I'll get back to that in just a second. And 3, they continue to blame corporate greed. They say, and have said for weeks now, that the reason you're still paying high prices is because your grocery store is greedy, and they want to keep charging high prices to make money off you. Even Chuck Schumer the other day blamed big oil for high gas prices, when policies overseen by this administration are partly responsible for why we're still paying more for gas today than we were this time last year. The junk fees thing is something that they've been pushing for a while now, and they did get rid of junk fees. These are these like added fees that you get at credit card bills and stuff like that. That's great, and we all welcome it, but that's not going to help make more money at the end of the month for people, so to speak. That's why the economy is still an issue, and that's why, bringing us back to the issue of them having to go to Philadelphia today, that's why this administration is losing support amongst people of color, including Hispanics, which favor Trump out west in Nevada over Joe Biden.
Ray, I got to say, listening to that, and that was a little bit of an extended clip from Karine Jean-Pierre, but I question the wisdom of answering questions about the president and repeating the phrase, the president will not forget, has not forgotten. Because that, to me, that I know that's a little snarky, but everyone thinks the president does forget stuff. And
look, it's not really that snarky, Ed. I mean, every day, not once a week, Ed, but every day we see a new clip of our befuddled president standing there looking vacantly around, waiting for somebody to tell him what to do, somebody to point him, go this way. No, Mr. President, don't step there. You'll step off the platform, and so on. So I don't see how snarky it could be to just point out the obvious. Our president, the leader of the free world, the commander-in-chief, is befuddled and confused, evidently, most of the time. And I don't think he can remember what he has already forgotten.
Yes. So, listen, I will say this on behalf of the president. I do think there is some price gouging going. I've said that on the show before. Tim accuses me of hating capitalism. I do not. Capitalism is awesome. It is a powerful engine for bringing people out of poverty, entire cultures, okay? But I do think there's some price gouging going on. However, having said that, the president is getting blamed, rightfully so, for the inflation that is happening, for the downturn in the economy, for the poor employment news that we get all the time, and that is because of his policies. So while corporate greed may be a partial explanation for what people are paying at the grocery store, it is not the whole story. And in any case, it's irrelevant because the president, in the minds of increasing numbers of voters, is to blame, and that perception is what is endangering the Biden reelection. And we said on this show, presidents get too much blame when things are bad, too much credit when things are good. But that's the way it is. President Biden, you wanted the job. All right, 5-minute break for news, and we will be right back.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The Stand is the official online and print publications of the American Family Association, but more than that, it's a hub that connects you with in-depth information about things that can impact you and your family. And it provides biblical encouragement to strengthen your faith and your families. Sign up for a 6-month free trial to the print version and listen to the Stand Radio podcast at afa.net/The Stand.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Former President Donald Trump is back in court for his New York criminal hush money trial. Jury deliberations are expected to begin today. Eric Shawn has more from outside the courthouse.
The former president of the United States, a felony criminal defendant, waiting to find out his fate that is now in the hands of 12 ordinary Americans. The former president walked into court giving a thumbs up. He uncharacteristically did not make any comments this morning. He has always, every morning, basically lambasted and criticized this case. Trump can be convicted if the jury finds that he makes or causes a false entry in the business records, alters a true entry in the business records, omits to make a true entry in the business records, or prevents the making of a true entry, or causes the omission thereof in the business records. That's what the law says.
Former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree says even if Trump is convicted, he doesn't see him going to jail.
Yeah, I don't see President Trump going to Rikers. Look, the first thing to keep in mind is that in the event of a conviction, sentencing is not going to happen immediately. It is going to happen many months from now, potentially even after the election. But nonetheless, the judge is going to understand that he is confronted with a situation that is without precedent in American history. I can't imagine former President Trump getting sent to Rikers. I think the far likelier outcome in the event of a conviction is either a sentence of probation, potentially home confinement. But I would sense probation is a much likelier alternative given the unique circumstances of this case.
Remember this?
Who doesn't love a yellow school bus? Right? Can you raise your hand if you love a yellow school bus, right? Most of us, many of us went to school on the yellow school bus. Right?
But if the Biden administration has its way, it'll be green school buses. The White House and the EPA announcing a $900 million plan to replace diesel school buses with electric ones across 530 school districts in the country. According to the administration, this will create, quote, new, good U.S. manufacturing jobs. Here's EPA Administrator Michael Regan.
With increasing demand for electric school buses, we'll see the development of new, good-paying manufacturing jobs and investment in local businesses. As more and more schools make the switch to electric buses, there will be a need for American-made batteries, charging stations, and service providers to maintain the buses, supercharging and reinvigorating local economies.
Fox Business host Cheryl Casoni wants to know what demand he is talking about.
Millions of dollars in government subsidies have been handed out to the EV industry, but sales of EVs continue to slow. Where are those charging stations that we were promised across the country, guys? Yeah. So more money thrown at this electric dream, if you will.
A leader of the Hamas terrorist organization is praising anti-Israel protesters on university campuses across the country. Bob Kellogg reports.
Senior Hamas official Khalid Marshall is thanking the Great Student Flood for giving the terrorist organization a chance to dismantle the Zionist enterprise, according to Campus Reform. Veteran educator Janice Krause thinks today's students are clueless.
Most of them have no idea why they're out there. Some of the leaders have been hired, we know that. And so they are getting as many students as they can to come along with them and indoctrinating them. And, of course, it's not a hard sell because our liberal universities are seemingly a prime training ground.
Krause says there's a silver lining in these protests because legislators are beginning to take notice.
The protests have caused quite a bit of consternation among legislators who have said to college presidents, if you can't keep control of your students, we don't have any confidence in your leadership.
Marshall is also calling for students to siege Israeli and American embassies, according to Campus Reform. I'm Bob Kellogg.
Hopes for interest rate cuts this year by the Federal Reserve are steadily fading, with a stream of recent remarks by Fed officials underscoring their intention to keep borrowing costs high as long as needed to curb persistently elevated inflation. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
What we believe about the Bible is based on what we believe about its source.
The God Who Speaks, the award-winning documentary from the American Family Association, is now available in a special limited edition DVD set. This release includes a Sunday school curriculum and 2 hours of additional footage. Go to thegodwhospeaks.org to get your copy today. thegodwhospeaks.org. Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome back. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. I'm joined in studio by Steve Jordahl. Steve.
Hey.
Good morning / good afternoon to you.
Good morning / good afternoon / good evening.
And we say that
somewhere in the world.
Somewhere because we do have listeners in the Eastern time zone.
That's right.
Also from Kansas City, Kansas, Dr. Ray Pritchard is with us. Ray, talk a little bit about keepbelieving.com, this wonderful ministry that, how many years have you had?
18 years.
18 years you've had Keep Believing.
Yeah. Well, look, let me tell you, we've posted something new since yesterday. If you come to the website, keepbelieving.com, there's audio of a message I gave last summer up at Forest Springs Conference Center in northern Wisconsin. It's called, Can You Give Me Some Good News? Can you give me some good news? And I begin by talking about something that happened right here on Today's Issues a couple of years ago when Tim Wildman, our leader and, head of the party, asked on the radio one day, I think Chris Wood was there and Fred Jackson, and it was pretty a morbid day. One of those days where it was a
lot of bad news.
A lot of bad news, and finally Tim just broke in, unplanned, as usually happens. Can you give me some good news? And from that story, some good news from the story of the wheat and tares that Jesus gave in Matthew chapter 13. So that's on the front page of the Keep Believing website. It's free. You can download it. It's audio. You can listen to it. And I think, Ed, we're still living in days when good news seems to be in short supply.
Yeah.
So if you're in need of some good news, surf on over to keepbelieving.com and click on Can You Give Me Some Good News? And I hope it encourages you.
I think I'm going to listen to that on the way home today. I'm in good spirits. It's not that I need a syringe full of good news necessarily, but I'm always in the market for good news. But folks, I do want to tell you that Dr. Ray Pritchard is one of my favorite preachers and teachers. So if that carries any weight with you, and it may not, it may work against Ray. I don't know, but check out Keep Believing, keepbelieving.com, and then also remember that he has an entire year's worth of reading through the Bible, both video and audio, that you can avail yourself of and be blessed by, and continue on and read or listen to with others, thousands now, right, Ray?
That's right, thousands around the world. And by the way, folks, if you're not on the internet feed for Today's Issues, it would be worth hopping on the streaming feed to see Steve Jordahl's shirt.
There you go.
Steve, when I grow up, I want a shirt. I want a shirt like that. Well, it's beyond all description. It's beautiful.
Thank you. The bad news is you can't wear this if you grow up. So
well, that's okay. That's the other part of the problem.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Steve, we've stalled long enough. Bring us some of that. Bring us some of that bad news.
Actually, I got good news.
You do?
Good news is we don't live in Australia.
Ah, all right. I believe you.
Yeah, so Matt Walsh, I've been listening to his podcast. He's having a war with Australia right now.
Really?
Yes, he is. Because they had a TV program on that was called, it was something where they sent regular people out into the wilderness to fend for themselves.
And the wilderness in Australia is dangerous.
Well, it started here and everything, and they get people
like a survivor.
Yeah,
kind of
like
thing?
a survivor thing.
Yeah.
Well, in Australia, they did the same program, but they made sure that they had a trans person,
Oh, my
and a gay
goodness.
person who know nothing, who didn't last 24 hours. But anyway, this is another thing that I'm sure we're going to hear from Matt Walsh on his war, because Australia now has a new government position. The Prime Minister there, Jacinta Allen, has asked a government person there to be now the new Secretary for Men's Behavioral Change.
Oh, my goodness.
His name is Tim Richardson, first parliamentary secretary for men's behavioral change, a new role aimed at reducing violence against women, which I guess
We're all, listen, I don't know any men. I don't know a single man.
You're not a man.
Who would be opposed to, who are in favor of violence against
you're not a man if you're in favor or commit violence against women.
Okay,
but really,
So is that what that's your explanation for the story? So we can begin to question you, or is there more to that?
No. This is you can question me anytime. You don't have to
I
wait.
guess what I'm saying is
Tim never
this,
waits.
This is a cabinet level position
Yes.
that is where the secretary of it, whatever they call the head of these cabinet positions in Australia, to correct men's behavior.
Yep. Men's behavioral change. So I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot of.
Ray, how long have you been married?
50 years in August.
50 years. Well, wow. Great. My wife and I'll be 43 in June. Okay, so how much has the behavioral change process worked for you, just in terms of being married?
Let me say this.
I'm hanging you out to dry, rather.
I have been a lifelong project. And I am still very much a work in progress.
You think a cabinet level position in this country would have had any impact on you?
You know, you just kind of wonder, what are they thinking down there in Australia? A cabinet, look, it's kind of crazy. What's that guy going to do for men's behavioral change? That sounds like something out of Orwell's 1984, right?
Yep.
It's a scary kind of title. You start here, but boy, you could see how that could move in some really bad directions fast. That's weird. Okay, can I just say that's my professional opinion. That's very weird.
Steve, here's the thing. The further a culture, and let's talk about Western civilization just in general.
Yep.
This is a broad brush. I admit that I'm painting with one.
There you go.
Okay. So the further you go from God, the quicker you run out of runway in trying to solve problems that flow from our sinful nature. Okay? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You just run out of ideas. And if you go to the woke side of things, like Australia is far more woke even than the U.S., from what I can tell. From this distance, admittedly, it's quite a bit of distance. But when you're dealing with fallen human nature and you do not want to preach Christ crucified, and you do not want the cross to be applied to that fallen human nature, you're going to run out of options. And this demonstrates that you go into foolhardiness, full foolhardy mode, like they are in Australia. And my view from, again, thousands of miles away has always been that Australian men are men's men.
That's the thing that Matt was saying, too.
Yeah.
He always thought, they're descended from prisoners, for goodness sake.
Right. That these are tough hombres. But listen, I think they treat their Sheilas just right.
Just right.
What do you think about trying to
That was
impose?
very good.
Yeah, that
that
wasn't
was
bad.
good.
But if I stick with it too long, I'll wind up sounding like a Russian. That's the way all my accents go. It seems pretty foolhardy to me, Steve. What do you think if you're going to try to have a cabinet position to change men on that kind of basic level?
All right. I want to make a difference between the change that Ray and you and me and all of us who try to become godly husbands make and the change that they're talking about here. marriage is meant to make us more Christ-like. It helps
Husbands
us.
and wives.
Yeah. So I also am trying to do my best to change daily to be a better husband to my wife. But the cabinet position of a secretary for men's behavioral change, I like it. I like it because we will have months and months, if not years, of stuff to talk about on this show now.
Yes.
As we start seeing what exactly they're going to do. So,
yeah. Well, anyway, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on Australia.
Yeah, I
and,
will.
Bring in the foolishness of the week from Australia.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. How long has President Biden been padding his resume and maybe not being completely honest with the American people?
4. I don't know.
4.
How long?
Well,
it seems like a long time.
Yeah.
Forever.
It's forever. It's just about. So I want you to hear something. I don't have to tell you exactly what date this is because just the voice here will tell you that it's been a while. But I want you to hear Cut 8 without any other introduction. Cut 8.
Now, on the political scene, one of the Democratic candidates is Senator Joseph Biden. Have you seen the problem he's been having? He went around and made a speech. And apparently, he quoted I think it was a British politician, took his speech and kind of paraphrased it as his own. And then the press got on him, and then he was charged also with taking part of Bobby Kennedy's speeches. And Biden says, not to worry, he reassured his staff. He said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
For those of you under 50, it was Johnny Carson in 1987.
1987.
87.
Oh, okay. So his reference to Bobby Kennedy was obviously after Senator Kennedy had been assassinated. He had taken some of his old political speeches.
He was accused of plagiarism back then.
That is a funny joke. Johnny Carson was the master of late night television. And that is funny. He had nothing to fear but fear itself. So Winston Churchill was also victimized by Joe Biden.
Yes. All right, let's do some.
Or was that FDR? Who said
FDR?
FDR. All right, my bad.
Well,
see,
I think FDR got it from Winston Churchill, although he didn't tell anybody.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
All right. All right.
All right, let's talk about some law enforcement stuff. So Denver, Colorado, has been among the top cities that has actually embraced the defund the police movement. And they have taken millions of dollars from their police department recently so that they can deal with the rush of illegal immigrants that are coming to Denver and living there. So it's gotten to the point where Denver does not think that they can adequately answer all the 911 calls that are coming in. I mean, there's not more 911 calls than normal, but there's a lot less police resources than normal. So they have decided they are going to start releasing drones. Call 911, get a drone, come to your house. And they say primarily, at least at the beginning, this is going to be used so they can assess the severity and if it's if someone, it's a swatting situation, if, someone calls a SWAT team in and there's no real crime or going on or anything. So they want to make sure that there's a legitimate 911 call, so they send the drone first. But that's got to be – already people are complaining about the time it takes for 911 to respond in a lot of these cities. That's going to introduce a whole another level of delay.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, sending a drone, Ray, what could go wrong? Okay?
What could go wrong?
So you're going to have drones. Now listen, the police using drones in certain circumstances actually sounds like a great idea. Okay, it would save a lot of time to send a drone. You could follow a suspect if he's fleeing a convenience store.
They're already doing that.
Yeah, so some of that, but flying drones around the city there's a call. I think there's a fight going on next door, maybe a domestic violence thing going on. What's the drone going to do, Ray? Just going to zip up to the window and peek inside?
Nothing weird about that,
and see if anyone's fighting. The potential abuse of technology really is. I think you mentioned, sounds like George Orwell's 1984.
Right.
We're getting pretty
Right.
close to the government having that kind of power.
Oh, look. This thing is already happening. We're going to see drone usage multiply. Look, aren't they already talking? No, this is not about the police, but aren't they already talking about Amazon deliveries by drone?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And certain restaurants, certain places where they're going to deliver the food to you by drones. So you hardly know what to say about a story like this because this is just the world we're living in, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
Steve, are you shocked by this story?
Oh, well, no. I'm thinking that I'm sitting on my porch. I'm really hungry, and I see a Pizza Hut drone go by. I don't know.
Gonna hack it. Gonna have to hack it.
I might.
Shoot it down
Get
so
some
you can
pizza.
get the pizza.
I'm just saying. No, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, they need to do something. There's another story that was out this morning, and it was kind of making headlines, although the news value of it is a little late. This was talking about a survey that Boston Mayor Michelle Wu took in 2021 before she took the office, when she was just campaigning for it. But they asked her about some criminal reforms that one of the Massachusetts DAs was considering, and it was decriminalizing a whole bunch of stuff. Listen to this. This is what, now they haven't done it, but this is what Boston Mayor Michelle Wu says she would be in favor of. Decriminalizing a dozen charges should be declined. Okay, not decriminalized technically, but they won't prosecute.
They won't prosecute.
They're not going to be. They wouldn't, under this regime, be prosecuting shoplifting, larceny, disorderly conduct, receiving stolen property, driving with a suspended license, breaking and entering with property damage, wanton and malicious destruction of property, threats, minor in possession of alcohol, marijuana possession, possession with intent to distribute, non-marijuana drug possession. All of that, the handcuffs are off, so to speak, not to be too cute about it, but
yeah, these are her political views.
These are her political views.
She's the mayor of Boston. Listen, I have not lived in Boston since 1978 when I left Boston College. I have lived in Mississippi, basically, with the exception of 1 year, since 1985. My wife is from Mississippi. And I'm just going to tell you, I am glad we raised our kids down here in the South, because that's crazy land up there, Ray. This mayor also said she was in favor of shuttering. This is she was asked, do you support shuttering the Boston police gang database? And she said yes. This is a crazy person.
This is a crazy person. This is crazy talk. This is like, okay, things aren't bad enough, so let's go out to San Francisco and see what they did, and let's try to do that here in Boston,
and magnify it.
Yeah.
And magnify it, right?
Wu said that she would be in favor, this is again from a 2021 survey, she would be in favor of demilitarizing the police, which means, she said, police should not have the ability to use tear gas, rubber bullets, or attack dogs.
Okay, now that probably sounds good to Mayor Wu while the people of Boston are behaving themselves. But if there are riots in Boston, what does she expect the police to use? Harsh language?
Don't do that. Wasn't it Boston where the mayor said that during the Floyd riots that we have to give them room to destroy things?
No, I don't think that was the Boston mayor. I think that was, I forget who that was. Maybe
Baltimore.
Yeah,
Thank
Baltimore.
you, Brent. Yeah, it was Baltimore.
Listen, she's obviously a quote-unquote progressive, Ray. They just don't see the real world, the way the rest of us do. Because what we found out in places like San Francisco is when you tell criminals you're not going to prosecute them, in San Francisco they said for crimes under $900 in value, guess what they do? They steal $850 worth of stuff,
right?
And your CVS gets shut down.
Look, this is like a textbook case, how to destroy a great American city.
Right.
Defund the police, defang the police, take away their weapons. And I don't mean just the guns, but take away everything that they have traditionally used to deal with criminals, this is what you get. You get chaos and a city out of control. Hard to believe that the people of Boston, I mean, Ed, there's a lot of good people in Boston. It's hard to believe the good people of Boston really agree with this.
Well, and to Steve's point, she has not been able to push for that.
No.
But the fact that they elect a mayor who has those kind of ideas and ideals is pretty striking.
It was in 2015. It was Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake, and it was when they were doing protesting and doing the stuff. It was around Freddie Gray at the time.
Yeah.
And so there were some riots in Baltimore, and Stephanie Rawlings Blake called the police off and said, quote, "We also need to give those who wish to destroy space to do that as well."
And guess what they did?
Destroyed.
They destroyed.
This
is again, I go back to the worldview that excludes the reality of God and the reality of our depraved nature and the necessity of salvation and repentance, faith, all those kind of things. You shove all that to the side and you think people are basically good, and if you give them a little bit of room to get their frustrations out, they won't break into the nearest Best Buy and steal big screen TVs. Okay, but that's exactly what they did. So I guess you
gotta eat.
Says,
you gotta eat.
That's
so.
right. As Tim always says, you get the government you deserve. And it's hard to have sympathy when people elect these kinds of nutcases. And I'm sorry, the mayor of Boston, if she actually believes those things, she's a nutcase.
Yep.
And she will bring untold misery on the people of Boston if she's allowed to put those kinds of ideas into practice.
All right.
What else you got?
Hey, Ray, I got a question for you. When you go, I don't know if you still go to the movies, like the theater movies, because everything's streaming these days.
Right,
when you go to the movies, are you going so that you can get an accurate view of the world as it is now?
No. No. That'd be like the last place I'd go to get an accurate view of the world.
Well, in fact, you didn't ask me, but I'll give you an answer. I go to get away from the world as it is. So tell me, why do you ask such a question?
Well, I asked because there's a couple researchers who decided they took a look at Hollywood movies, 250 of them from put out between 2013 and 2022, and they found out that these movies are not accurately showing the danger of climate change.
Oh no.
They're not. They do not. They're not reflective of the current climate crisis. They want they have set up a new bar that movies need to make called the Climate Reality Check, where they have to have at least one scene where climate change is expressed and one character who buys into the climate change hysteria. But this is what caught my ear. Most movies fell short, fewer than 10% of the 250 films passed, and climate change was mentioned in 2 or more scenes at fewer than 4% of the time. This, they say, is out of touch with movie-going public that wants to see their reality reflected on screen.
What?
I'm not saying that,
Who did they survey?
I don't know. I don't think they did. I'm just saying.
So you're saying part of what you're saying is, in general, these people who did this study believe that people go to the movies to see their own lives reflected.
Right, and they want to make sure that we're scared about climate change.
You know, first of all, Ray, I don't go to and it's been a while since I've been to the theater. I don't go to see my life. I'm going there to see somebody else's life.
I know all I want to know about my own life.
Yes, that's right. Well, listen, that's those are scientists who also aren't living in the real world. If they think that most people, I don't think want to see climate change preaching in a movie. I think that works against their cause. I think people are less sympathetic to the climate change worldview when they're constantly having it shoved in their face. So, I don't know. I go to the movies to get as much popcorn as I can eat.
There you go.
And so that's why I go. So, all right, folks, that's all the time we have for the show today. Thank you for joining us. More great programming directly ahead on American Family Radio. Lord willing, we will see you tomorrow right back here. Please join us.
And my father, your great-grandfather, fought in World War II.
Really?
He was a gunner.